Today's episode of Revolutionary War Rarities focuses on the only significant battle of the American Revolution that was fought west of the Mississippi River, and the consequences of this battle are significant. So make sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell so you'll be notified when a new episode is released. Follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook group, follow us on your favorite podcast application, and check out our website at www.fastfunhistory.com. And now, Revolutionary War Rarities. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Revolutionary War Rarities Season 3 for this episode entitled Fort San Carlos, St. Louis's Revolutionary Stand. We are the podcast from the Sons of the American Revolution, and my name is Jim Griffith, and today I'm joined by Mr. Steve Biggs. Steve, welcome to Revolutionary War Rarities.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we thank you for being here. And quite frankly, I thank you for bringing up this topic to us. Obviously, this was not something that I had really thought about. Right? I don't know that a lot of people have thought about this because, quite frankly, when people think of the American Revolution, they think of the battles everywhere from Massachusetts down to Georgia, but they don't necessarily think of the battles inland, certainly not in St. Louis. So I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, and I know as a Missouri boy, this has a specific interest in your mind and in your efforts there. So, like I said, when I think of St. Louis, Missouri, I think of the Mississippi River, the Gateway Arch, the St. Louis Cardinals. I even think of Lewis and Clark, but I don't think of the American Revolution. So let's get into this and talk about it for a few minutes.
The Battle of Fort San Carlos, it's a story of grit and gunfire. You have to picture French settlers out there in the middle of nowhere and Spanish soldiers. They were outnumbered. They were blasting guns and cannon from a lone tower against British forces and Native Americans. Fort San Carlos held the line, serving St. Louis, thwarting a British control of the West. From muddy trenches to a river bluff, the tale echoes of defiance.
Well, it does. I think it echoes of defiance, but it also echoes in shaping the entire Mississippi Valley, right? This was a defense which was helping to secure passage along the Mississippi River, and that was one of the things. So this was St. Louis in 1780. Now, St. Louis was founded in 1764 by French fur traders. Now, with a population in St. Louis that included about 700 French Creoles, 150 enslaved Africans, and a few Spanish officials, that's what St. Louis thrived on, was fur trade.
That's right. And, trade invites trouble. By 1780, Britain, allied with the native tribes, they sought the Mississippi Valley to encircle American rebels. Spanish Lieutenant Governor Fernando de Leyva commanded St. Louis, and he learns of a British-led attack that's coming down from Fort Mackinac. He orders 4 stone towers to be built, but only Fort San Carlos, a 30-foot round tower at present-day 4th and Walnut Streets, is ready by May.
Now, I'm just curious, Steve, how far is that 4th and Walnut Street, right? The historic location for Fort San Carlos, or that 30-foot tower, how far is that from the Gateway Arch?
Oh, Jim, that's probably about maybe a football field. The streets in St. Louis are numbered coming away from the river, so that would be the 4th Street west of the river at 4th and Walnut Street.
And just for people that have never been to St. Louis, the Gateway Arch sits right at the Mississippi River, correct?
That's right. Overlooks the river.
Okay. Now, the readiness from Fort San Carlos proved absolutely vital. So on May the 26th of 1780, almost exactly 245 years ago, there were somewhere between 1,200 and 2,000 native warriors that were led by British fur traders like Emmanuel Hess. They were led to strike St. Louis. Now, they attacked while the villagers were working in the fields outside, and they killed 21 villagers and captured about 71 with the aim of overrunning the village.
Fernando de Leyva had 197 defenders under his command, 29 Spanish regulars, and 168 French militia. They fire muskets, and they had 5 cannons there at Fort San Carlos. A fellow named Francois Vallet, who was a French militia captain, from St. Genevieve, a town just south of St. Louis, had sent 60 men, and he tipped the scales with lead shot from his mines. The battle itself lasts about 2 hours, and the attackers are repelled.
Now, across the river, George Rogers Clark, which is a name that's fairly well known, he fended off a simultaneous attack on the on Cahokia, which is an ancient Native American settlement, which my understanding is still marked with ancient Indian mounds to this day. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a field trip that all St. Louis school kids take over to Cahokia. At one time, the Cahokia area was the largest Native American settlement north of Mexico City, so it's pretty large.
It's sizable, yeah. So
Yeah.
that victory blocked British control of the Mississippi River and secured Spanish and American control of the Mississippi River. DeLeyva died of illness just a few weeks later and is at that time is honored by Spain.
Yes, we've had Spanish government officials over here honoring Fernando de Leyva, and every Sunday of Memorial Weekend, we honor the 21 dead. They were mostly farmers and enslaved workers. They're mourned at the St. Genevieve location where the militia came to save St. Louis from. This is a national SAR color guard event, and this year we expect color guardsmen from at least 8 states, and we're going to have a very large musket salute. So Fort San Carlos itself, was dismantled in 1800 and leaves no trace in St. Louis. So that's why we go to St. Genevieve, where the cavalry came from, the French militia.
Sure, sure. So the battle was pivotal for geography purposes, right? The Battle of St. Louis, also called Fort San Carlos, it kept the Mississippi River open for American expansion. Spain's defense, backed by French Creoles and Valais, showed colonial unity against Britain.
Yeah, some of the quirks, I guess, about it. Fernando de Leyva funded the trenches from his own pocket. He had trenches constructed outside as an outer perimeter, and then the tower was back behind that. Also, the Native Americans, they showed great courage, but not a lot of strategy in charging over and over towards the trenches. And the Missouri Capitol also has a painting that depicts the battle in it.
So why is Fort San Carlos a Revolutionary War rarity? Well, it was not a grand fortress, as we've said. It was a lone 30-foot tower in a fur trading village that held off a British attack. Its victory, fought by Spanish and French underdog defenders, saved the West. Yet its story fades behind the more famous challenges all along the East Coast, many of which we've already talked about on Revolutionary War Rarities.
Yet again, we discover how we arrived at this place in history. Fort San Carlos played a vital role in our history. It stood firm in St. Louis and repelled a British assault and secured the Mississippi River, a frontier fort that shaped our nation's boundaries. So today, St. Louis is gateway to the West for Americans rather than gateway to the West for the British.
Yeah, and I think that's a neat thing when you think about the history of that. Is without the Battle of Fort San Carlos, it's feasible that the Gateway Arch and the entire western part of the United States may not exist to this day. So that's one of the things I love about history, is understanding the background to understand how we gained control of certain areas. And the Battle of St. Louis was obviously critical, and that, my friends, is a Revolutionary War rarity. My name is Jim Griffith.
And I'm Steve Biggs. Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much. We do appreciate you joining us on this episode of Revolutionary War Rarities, and we thank everyone for joining us for this episode. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks for the next episode, when we will be rejoined by Jim Maples. I've been asked several times where Jim Maples is. I promise you, he will be back soon. He is not gone. I promise you that. So this has been a production of the National Society Sons of the American Revolution, www.sar.org.